Well, it's another cloudy, feeling like wintry day today. It is April 18th in the northern hemisphere. And it's windy and cold. It's like 65 degrees in my house right now. This is cold. But some people survive in the tundra. So is it really that cold? Who knows? I just wanted to share something because I skip days with stuff that's supposed to be daily. I just some for some reason I can't do stuff daily. I think I get over it, or maybe I don't care about myself enough to do stuff daily. I don't even know what it is. But I skipped today and I went back to yesterday's Mark Nepo entry, and I have been talking about Indiana Jones lately because of the word penitence. And listen to this, you guys. For April 17th, it says, "A wisdom moment of trust. If you can't cross over alive, how can you cross when you're dead?" By somebody named Kabir. I don't know who that is. Listen to this. It says, "The need to step into what we fear, and in doing so, disperse its hold on us, is powerfully brought to life by a moment in the film Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade." Sometimes the universe just says, you're doing things right. And this to me is that. I haven't, I don't know, I haven't read, I had no idea. This says, after searching everywhere within reason and memory for the Holy Grail, Jones stands on an enormous precipice, a deep chasm before him, the Grail waiting on the other side. His father, wounded and depending on the Grail to heal, cries out possible interpretations of the clues Joan has been given to reach the Grail. After what seems a lifetime of inner debate and escalating fear, he dares, against everything he knows, to step into the void above the chasm. And as he does, an enormous stone foundation appears beneath his feet, a bridge that was there all along. Oh, yeah, when he steps out, a leap of faith. This was the leap of faith part. This is a moment of risk and trust, a wisdom moment that repeats itself in our lives in both small and large ways, over and over. The cup we need to drink from, the ancient, ever healing cup of wholeness, waits beyond some deep chasm we are afraid to cross. Deep. Often we are driven to the edge by the cries and clues of elders and loved ones, only to find that nothing makes sense that there seems nowhere to go. And then the atom of risk begins to replay itself in those brought to the edge. Then when all known ways of seeing have failed, we sometimes dare to step into the void, whether that void is a chasm of purpose or self-esteem, or a ravine in relationship, or a canyon of addiction. This crazy wisdom step that begins with risk and lands in trust reveals a foundation that was there all along, but which is only made visible by our risk to think and see in new ways, and our trust to step into what we fear. I think that's so funny that this book of awakening has a reference to Indiana Jones. The leap of faith, and mine was penitence. And then he had to spell out Jehovah, but in some language, Jehovah begins with an I or something, and all the things go. Such a good movie. You guys should check it out. Anyway, all the books I'm reading right now, I'm reading Red Rising, the third book of Red Rising, and the fifth book of Sarah J. Maas's Throne of Glass, and everything is so action packed. And even this beautiful, gorgeous little tiny book of Sense and Sensibility, it's like, is Marianne gonna die? Is she not? Everything is so action packed right now. And so I'm glad that Marianne is not dying anymore. Everybody's heading back to Barton. We're gonna see how Mrs. Dashwood is gonna take the news of what Willoughby came over and bared his soul to Eleanor in hopes of getting some pity and forgiveness. He took a leap of faith. I'm gonna watch it today because I have to now. I have to now. The universe told me I had to watch this movie now. We are on chapter 11 of Sense and Sensibility. I've made my decision. I am going to read Mansfield Park next. And I had a realization yesterday because I was trying to watch some videos about what it is about, Mansfield Park, just to get some themes. This theme is like obviously Sense and Sensibility, but there's like heavy money themes and heavy like sickness themes and heavy like grief, and Fanny's terrible. But there was a video by that Ellie Dashwood girl who I really like, woman, and she was talking about how often the heroines in Jane Austen books are too good for the people that they end up with. And she had Mansfield Park as one of them, and like these women who are just like way too good for these men. And everybody's like, yeah, this person's way too good for this person, and this person's way too good for that person. I'm like, what if it's a commentary on the time? Like, women had to settle. Men had to settle sometimes, I guess, but women had to settle if they were too good for somebody, but it was like the only person they could get. And it was like their one person who was into them, and they just had to marry. There was a lot of women settling. Maybe it's just a commentary on that. So I thought that was interesting that my brain could actually make those connections. I think I'm learning about learning and learning how to read with a not critical eye, but more of like a comprehensive thinking cap on. I was proud of myself for that. Okay. Chapter 11, Sense and Sensibility, of Volume 3. We are on chapter, actually, if you're following along, 47. Mrs. Dashwood did not hear unmoved the vindication of her former favourite, Willoughby. She rejoiced in his being clear from some part of his imputed guilt. She was sorry for him. She wished him happy. But the feelings of the past could not be recalled. Nothing could restore him with a faith unbroken, a character unblemished to Marianne. Nothing could do away with the knowledge of what that latter had suffered through his means, nor remove the guilt of his conduct toward Eliza. Nothing could replace him, therefore, in her former esteem, nor injure the interest of Colonel Brandon. She's on Team Colonel Brandon now. Before we had Twilight, we had Team Willoughby or Team Colonel Brandon for Marianne. Had Mrs. Dashwood, like her daughter, heard Willoughby's story from himself, had she witnessed his distress, had been under the influence of his countenance and his manner, and observed how drunk he was, it is probable that her compassion would have been greater. But it was neither in Elinor's power nor in her wish to rouse such feelings in another by her retailed explanation, as had at first been called forth in herself. Reflection had given calmness to her judgment, and sobered her own opinion of Willoughby's deserts. She wished, therefore, to declare only the simple truth, and lay open such facts as were really due to his character, without any embellishment of tenderness to lead to the fancy astray. She's bringing the most sense she can, especially to these people who have such big sensibility about them. She said, these are the facts. Nothing frilly about it. I'm not showing off how much he performed for me. In the evening, when they were all together, Marianne began voluntarily to speak of him again. Good for her. But that it was not without an effort, the restless, unquiet thoughtfulness in which she had, for some time previously sitting, her rising colour as she spoke, and her unsteady voice plainly showed. I wish to assure you both, said she, that I see everything, as you can desire me to do. Mrs. Dashwood would have interpreted her instantly with soothing tenderness, had not Eleanor, who really wished to hear her sister's unbiased opinion by an eager sign, engaged her silence. Marianne slowly continued. It is a great relief to me what Eleanor told me this morning. I have now heard exactly what I wished to hear. For some moments her voice was lost, but recovering herself, she added with great calmness than before, I am now perfectly satisfied. I wish for no change. I never could have been happy with him, after knowing as sooner or later I must have known all this. I should have no confidence. I should have had no confidence, no esteem. Nothing could have done it away to my feelings. I know it, cried her mother. Happy with a man of libertine practices, with one who had so injured the peace of the dearest of our friends, and the best of men. No, my Marianne has not a heart to be made happy by such a man. Her conscience, her sensitive conscience, would have felt all that the conscience of her husband ought to have felt. Marianne sighed and repeated, I wish for no change. You consider the matter, said Eleanor, exactly as good mind and a sound understanding must consider it. And I dare say you perceive, as well as myself, not only in this, but in many other circumstances, reason enough to be convinced that your marriage must have involved you in many certain troubles and disappointments in which you would have been poorly supported by an affection on his side much less certain. Had you married, you must have always been poor. His expensiveness is acknowledged even by himself, and his whole conduct declares that self-denial in a word hardly understood by him is a word hardly understood by him. His demands and your inexperience altogether, together on a small, very small income, must have brought on distress, which would not be the less grievous to you from having been entirely unknown and unthought of before. Your sense of honor and honesty would have led you, I know, when aware of your situation, to attempt all the economy that would appear to you possible, and perhaps as long as your frugality retrenched only on your own comfort, you might have been suffered to practice it. But beyond that, and how little could the utmost of your single management do to stop the ruin which had begun before your marriage? Beyond that, had you endeavoured, however reasonably, to abridge his enjoyments, it is not to be feared that instead of prevailing on feelings so selfish to consent to it, you would have lessened your own influence on his heart, and made him regret the connection which had involved him in such difficulties? Marianne's lips quivered, and she repeated the word selfish in a tone that implied, do you really think him selfish? The whole of his behaviour, replied Eleanor, from the beginning to the end of the affair, has been grounded on selfishness. It was selfishness which first made him sport with your affections, which afterwards, when his own were engaged, made him delay the confession of it, and which finally carried him from Barton. His own enjoyment or his own ease was in every particular his ruling principle. Interesting. It is very true, my happiness never was his object. At present, continued Eleanor, he regrets what he had done. And why does he regret it? Because he finds it has not answered towards himself. He regrets it because he's not happy right now. Because he finds it has not answered towards himself. It has not made him happy. His circumstances are now unembarrassed. He suffers from no evil of that kind, and he thinks only that he has married a woman of a less amiable temper than yourself. Ugh. But does it thence follow that had he married you, he would have been happy? The inconveniences would have been different. He would then have suffered under the pecuniary distress which, because they are removed, he now reckons as nothing. He would have had a wife of whose temper he could make no complaint, but he would have been always necessitous always poor, and probably would have learnt to rank the innumerable comforts of a clear estate and good income as of far more importance even to domestic happiness than the mere temper of a wife. Right, the temper of a wife can't satiate his need for spending. Interesting. Well put. Well put. Probably would have learnt to rank the innumerable comforts of a clear state and good income as far more important, even to domestic happiness, than the mere temper of a wife. I have not a doubt of it, said Marianne, and I have nothing to regret. Nothing but my own folly. Rather say your mother's imprudence, my child, said Mrs. Dashwood. She must be answerable. Marianne would not let her proceed, and Elinor, satisfied that each felt their own error, wished to avoid any survey the past might weaken her sister's spirits. She therefore, pursuing the first object, immediately continued. One observation may, I think, be fairly drawn from the whole of the story, that all Willoughby's difficulties have arisen from the first offence against virtue in his behaviour to Eliza Williams. That crime has been the origin of every lesser one, and of all his present discontents. Well said, Marianne. Marianne assented most feelings to the remark. Oh, did she not say that? Did Elinor say that? I don't know who said that. Maybe Elinor. Marianne assented most feelings to the remark, and her mother was led by it to an enumeration of Colonel Brandon's injuries and merits, warm as friendship and design could unitedly dictate. Her daughter did not look, however, as if much of it were heard by her. She didn't want to hear anything about Colonel Brandon. Okay. Oh, but he's told Mrs. Dashwood that he loves Marianne. So Mrs. Dashwood's like, but Colonel Brandon, what do you think about that? Colonel Brandon? Huh? Oh, boy. Women kind of had to settle. I don't know. Elinor, according to her expectation, saw on the 2 or 3 following days that Marianne did not continue to gain strength as she had done. But while her resolution was unsubdued, and she still tried to appear cheerful and easy, her sister could safely trust to the effect of time upon her health. Oh, boy. Margaret returned. Poor Margaret. Who even is she? Nobody knows. Margaret returned, and the family were all restored to each other, again quietly settled at the cottage, and if not pursuing their usual studies with quite so much vigour as when they first came to Barton, at least planning a vigorous prosecution of them in future. Elinor grew impatient for some tidings of Edward. Rightly so. She had heard nothing of him since her leaving London, nothing new of his plans, nothing certain even of his present abode. Some letters had passed between her and her brother in consequence of Marianne's illness, and in the first of John's there had been this sentence, We know nothing of our unfortunate Edward, and can make no inquiries on so prohibited a subject, but conclude him to be still at Oxford. That's all she's heard of Edward so far, from her brother, which was all the intelligence of Edward afforded her by the correspondence, for his name was not even mentioned in any of the succeeding letters. It is a prohibited subject. She was not doomed, however, to be long in ignorance of his measures. Their manservant had been sent one morning to Exeter on business, and when as he waited at table, he had satisfied the inquiries of his mistress as to the event of his errand. This was his voluntary communication. I suppose you know, ma'am, that Mr. Ferrars is married. Marianne gave a violent start. I wonder if he's talking about Robert. Maybe he's talking about Robert. Nobody says first names. It's Miss Dashwood. And you're like, well, which one? Mr. Ferrars. Well, which one? Marianne gave a violent start, fixed her eyes upon Elinor, saw her turning pale, and fell back in her chair with hysterics. Mrs. Dashwood, whose eyes, as she answered the servant's inquiry, had intuitively taken the same direction, was shocked to perceive by Elinor's countenance how much she really suffered, and in a moment afterwards, alike distressed by Marianne's situation, knew not on which child to bestow her principal attention. She said, "Who do I take care of first?" Now they're both freaking out. The servant, who saw only that Miss Marianne was taken ill, had sense enough to call on one of the maids, who, with Mrs. Dashwood's assistance, supported into the other room. By that time Marianne was rather better, and her mother, leaving her to the care of Margaret and the maid, returned to Elinor, who, though still much disordered, had so far recovered the use of her reason and voice as to be just beginning an inquiry of Thomas as to the source of his intelligence. Mrs. Dashwood immediately took all that trouble on herself, and Elinor had the benefit of the information without the exertion of seeking it. Thank you very much, Mom. Who told you that Mr. Ferrars was married, Thomas? I see Mr. Ferrars myself, ma'am, this morning in Exeter, and his lady too, Miss Steele as was. And his lady too, Miss Steele as was. They were stopping in a chaise in the door of the New London Inn, as I went there with a message from Sally at the park to her brother, who is one of the post boys. I happened to look up, and as I went by the chaise, and I see directly it was the youngest Miss Steele, so I took off my hat, and she knew me and called to me and inquired after you, ma'am, and the young ladies, especially Miss Marianne, and bid me I should give her compliments and Mr. Ferrars's their best compliments and service. And however sorry they was that they had not time to come in and see you, but they was in a great hurry to go forwards, for they was going further down a little while, but however, when they'd come back, they'd make sure to come and see you. I don't know why. I don't know what's happening. But did she tell you she was married, Thomas? Yes, ma'am. She smiled and said how she had changed her name since she was in these parts. She was always very affable and free-speaking young lady, and very civil behaved, so I made free to wish her joy. That's terrible. It's really bad. Was Mr. Ferrars in the carriage with her? Yes, ma'am. I just see him leaning back in it, but he did not look up. He never was a gentleman much for talking. Elinor's heart could easily account for his not putting himself forward, and Mrs. Dashwood probably found the same explanation. Was there no one else in the carriage? No, ma'am, only they two. Do you know where they came from? They come straight from town, as Mrs. Ferrars told me. Mrs. Ferrars told me. And are going farther westward? Yes, ma'am, but not bide long. Not to bide long. They will soon be back again, and then they'd be sure and call here. I don't know why that's coming out, but it's just coming through me. It's really bad. Mrs. Dashwood, now looking at her daughter, but Elinor knew better than to expect them. She recognised the whole of Lucy in the message, and was very confident that Edward would never come near them. She observed in a low voice to her mother that they were probably going down to Mr. Pratt's near Plymouth. Thomas's intelligence seemed over. Elinor looked as if she wished to hear more. Did you see them off before you came away? No, ma'am. The horses was just coming out, but I could not bide any longer. I was afraid of being late. Did Mrs. Ferrars look well? Yes, ma'am. She said how she was very well, and to my mind, she was always a very handsome young lady, and she seemed vastly contented. Okay. I don't know. I'm sorry. Mrs. Dashwood could think of no other explanation, and Thomas and the tablecloth, now alike needless, were soon afterwards dismissed. Marianne had already sent to say that she should eat nothing more. Mrs. Dashwood's and Elinor's appetites were equally lost, and Margaret might think herself very well off that with so much uneasiness as both her sisters had lately experienced, so much reason as they had often had to be careless of their meals. She had never been obliged to go without her dinner before. When the dessert and the wine were arranged, and Mrs. Dashwood and Elinor left by themselves, they remained long together in a similarity of thoughtfulness and silence. Mrs. Dashwood feared to hazard any remark, and ventured not to offer consolation. She now found that she had erred in relying on Elinor's representation of herself, and justly concluded that everything had been expressly softened at the time to spare her from an increase of unhappiness, suffering as she then had suffered for Marianne. She found that she had been misled by the considerate attention of her daughter to think the attachment which once she had so well understood much slighter in reality than she had been wont to believe, or that it was now proved to be. She feared that under this persuasion she had been unjust, inattentive, nay, almost unkind to her Elinor, that Marianne's affliction became more acknowledged, more immediately before her, had too much engrossed her tenderness, and led her away to forget that in Elinor she might have a daughter suffering almost as much, certainly with less self-provocation and greater fortitude. Yeah, what's that called when there's like just a hyper-vigilant daughter who's just doesn't show any emotion because everybody else is so emotional? And there's just a lot going on. I get it. That's tough. Oh boy. Chapter 12. Join me next time for chapter 12. It's hard to go back and forth between accents, and I don't know what's happening with that accent, but it just came out of me, and so there you have it. That's what the servant man, what was his name? What was he called? Thomas? That's what Thomas sounded like to me. So there you have it. Everybody go watch Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, huh? I mean, it's coming into my awareness, so I'm going to go watch it. Join me next time for chapter 12 of volume 3 of Sense and Sensibility. Ta-ta and happy reading!